1975. An American Apollo spacecraft and a Soviet Soyuz spacecraft prepare to join in Earth orbit, 140 miles above the Atlantic near Portugal. During their two-day joint flight, astronauts and cosmonauts transferred between spacecraft. They conducted space experiments, and they tested a compatible rendezvous and docking system, evaluating its potential as the universal standard on future spacecraft for docking and rescue. The mission climaxed more than 3 years of planning and preparation, a time during which differences in language, in technology, in political creed were set aside in favor of the common goal. This was the mission that opened the door to international manned spaceflight, the mission that set the course for joint flights of the future. This was the mission of Apollo Soyuz. Baikonur Launch Complex in Kazakhstan, Central USSR. The Soyuz spacecraft, its crew approaching the end of pre-launch checks, is about to signal the start of this historic mission.
1 minute before launch. The key for launch has been turned. The fueling tower has been removed. 30 seconds before launch. The launch command has been given. Telemetry registry equipment has been turned on. Also the onboard control systems of the registration equipment here. Ignition. The engines are powered up. The launch. The booster is off. Moscow time 15 hours, 20 minutes, 10 seconds. The flight is proceeding normally. The programmed maneuver of the booster rocket has been given. 70 seconds of flight of the booster of the Soyuz spacecraft. The first stage has been passed, on which maximum acceleration is encountered. 120 seconds into the flight. The first stage side segments have separated. The speed is over 1.5 kilometers per second. The second stage engines are operating in a stable manner. Slight overload is being felt by the crew. The emergency jettison systems, rescue system, has been jettisoned. The covering shrouds has separated. Operation of the second stage has taken place, and the third stage engines of the booster have been turned on. The third stage engine has been switched off, and the spacecraft Soyuz has now been inserted into orbit. Orbital flight has been initiated. Into the Soviet Mission Control Center. Moscow time, 15 hours, 35 minutes. The Soyuz spacecraft is now in orbital flight. It is just now within the communication area of Ussurisk ground station. The crew is talking with the Mission Control Center.
In the pre-dawn calm of July 15th, The methodical countdown of Apollo moved with customary precision toward a mid-afternoon launch. Of lesser note was the fact that this would be the last flight of Apollo Saturn. And as the countdown narrowed, chances are that more than one member of the launch team reflected on other proud days of Apollo.
The weatherman continues to be cooperative.
A near-perfect day for the launch, made to order for the thousands lining the roadsides and beaches to witness this Apollo Saturn finale.
Starts at 3.1 seconds in the countdown. We'll hold down till thrust builds up.
11.
Engine
10,
ready light on.
9,
10, 9,
8,
8, 7, 6, 5,
4,
3, 2. Engine
1,
sequence start.
0.
1, 0. Launch commit. We have a liftoff. All engines building up thrust. Moving out. Clear the tower.
Roger, tower clear. Roger, Tom, you got good thrust on all engines. You're right on the money.
30 seconds, we're on the way.
Stand by for mode 1 Bravo. Mark, 1 Bravo.
1 Bravo, 2 Gs.
Roger.
And cabin pressure's coming down.
Roger.
Apollo Houston, you're go for station.
Roger, go for station. Okay, and that light is out on the 4B. We got acceleration.
Roger.
Apollo is placed in orbit.
5, 6, 8, 9. Go. Now. We're moving out.
And before the flight is 3 hours old, the docking module is smoothly extracted from the second stage booster, left trailing behind. During the next 40 hours, Apollo, through a series of maneuvers, will slowly close the orbital gap with Soyuz. The two crews will meet again, not as members of this or that nationality, but as friends who for 3 years shared their separate cultures and customs, and a part of themselves. In preparing for their mission, Soviet and American crews spent a good deal of time together. In formal mission training, in learning about the other man's culture, in getting to know the man himself.
In the United States, I want to visit Hollywood.
Alexei Leonov, Soyuz commander.
Because I want to be a movie star.
Colonel in the Soviet Air Force.
No, I don't want. Tom Stafford want.
Hello, Houston.
Can you see the Soyuz? He's hidden behind the docking module.
Aha. Here he comes, just above the docking module. Looks real pretty. Good show. Let's say that. Looking fine.
I'm approaching Soyuz.
Oh, please don't forget about your engines.
Less than 5 meters distance. 3 meters. 3 meters. 1 meter. Contact. Capture. We also have capture.
Roger, Tom, we'll pass it on.
Soyuz and Apollo are shaking hands now.
Houston, Apollo.
Go ahead, Tom.
Go breathe to Professor Bushuyev. Tell Professor Bushuyev it was a soft docking.
Around the world, millions watch and listen as the two spacecraft become one. Now they wait for the next dramatic event, the meeting of Soviet and American crews.
All right, on a show. Hawk Value, Loop 3.
Okay, the camera.
Ah! Just it.
Got it?
It'll stay open.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Tom.
Lexi. Just a moment. Okay, turn on the camera. Hit the remote.
Okay.
Here.
Camera.
Glad to see you. Here.
Pass it to Alexei. Rad, minute pass.
Очень рад. Это роща день. Советский Союз. Соединенных Штатов.
In the first crew transfer, astronauts Stafford and Slayton are hosted in Soyuz by cosmonauts Leonov and Kubasov. Vance Brand remains behind to monitor Apollo systems.
In the name of the Soviet people and from myself personally, I am
To mark the
congratulating
occasion,
you
leaders of both the
with the
USSR
significant
and the United
event, the
States
first
relay their
docking
congratulations.
of the Soviet spacecraft. New possibilities are opening up for fruitful development of scientific cooperation between countries and the peoples in the interests of peace and progress of all humanity. I wish you successful completion of the planned program and a safe return to Earth. Leonid Brezhnev.
The astronauts are on the line, sir.
Gentlemen, let me call to express my very great admiration for your hard work, your total dedication in preparing for this first joint flight.
It's taken us many years to open this door to useful cooperation in space between our two countries. And I'm confident that the day is not far off when space missions made possible
by this first joint effort will be more or less commonplace.
And may I say, in signing off,
here's to a soft landing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Among ceremonies scheduled for this first day of joint flight are the exchanges of national flags by the spacecraft commanders. Later, they sign certificates of docking for the Paris-based Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, the organization that validates all aviation and spaceflight records. Finally, they sit down to dinner in space, Russian style.
Right now, I've just finished some strawberries reconstituted. I'm fixing eating some too. We're getting ready to eat some borscht, as you can see here.
North of New England, as the workday ends, Tom Stafford presents Alexei Leonov's spruce tree seeds to be planted in Russian soil, a gift from the American people to the people of the Soviet Union to provide a living memorial to the flight. The spacecraft commanders also join the two halves of an Apollo-Soyuz medal. One half launched with Soyuz and the other half with Apollo to symbolize the link-up in orbit. When time comes to retire to their own craft, it's das vidanya and goodbye. The joint experiments would resume the following day, but only by voice. The next face-to-face meeting would be in Moscow in September.
This is Apollo Control. At acquisition here, we should have confirmation of undocking and a real-time television picture of Soyuz from Apollo as it backs away in preparation for the solar eclipse experiment.
Solar eclipse occurs briefly and infrequently on Earth, giving scientists too short a time for adequate study. But with two manned spacecraft and proper maneuvering, a solar eclipse can be simulated. Thus, with Apollo blotting out the solar disk, the Soyuz crew train their cameras on the solar corona, recording pictures for later study. They dock again providing yet another test of the compatible docking mechanism.
Apollo Houston, it was a beautiful docking. We had a good picture. We can see Italy coming up in the Mediterranean right now. Apollo Houston through Atson, we're hearing your calls.
Roger, we've docked. Everything was on time, though.
After some 3 hours, the two spacecraft separate for the last time, and Apollo maneuvers into position for the final joint experiment, ultraviolet absorption, the measurement of oxygen and nitrogen particles in the upper atmosphere. Apollo directs light beams of special wavelengths to a reflector mounted on Soyuz. The beams bounce back to Apollo and are there analyzed by a spectrometer. It is the first such measurement by this method. The results have given investigators a clearer knowledge of outer atmospheric makeup, including the quantities of ozone in the upper atmosphere. Termination of the experiment signals the end of the joint phase of the mission, and the separation between spacecraft grows more distant with each successive orbit. Apollo will fly solo for 4 more days, but the crew of Soyuz makes ready for return to Earth. Beneath its single striped parachute, Soyuz settles to Earth in Soviet Central Asia. Retro rockets cushion the impact.
Contact. The parachute.
3 memorable years have ended. Alexei Leonov and Valery Kubasov have secured yet another place in the history of spaceflight. Apollo continues in orbit. As the mission comes down to the wire, the docking module is jettisoned, and it too becomes part of an experiment. With the two instrumented spacecraft close together in the same orbit, it is possible to measure their relative movements caused by variations in Earth's gravity. The technique provides a means of accurately mapping the Earth's mass structure on a global basis.
Vital.
Go.
Guido.
Go.
Retro.
Go, flight.
GNC. Go flight.
Apollo
Eco.
Control, 99 hours, 29 minutes, phase elapsed time. Flight Director Frank Littleton
Go.
pulsing his flight controllers. Ecom reports everything looks fine.
Go for the burn.
Okay, Crip, everything's up. Great shape up here. The only thing we're concerned about is that you've got all your splashdown parties coordinated, over.
Well, I've been working on that.
Okay, sounds good.
In Pacific waters west of Hawaii, Apollo reaches the end of its journey and the end of an era.
Waving to the crowd, assembled here on the hangar deck of the USS New Orleans. Scott Slocum giving them a few more words of briefing about the ceremony, which will take place in just a few moments. Now they walk down a red carpet course. Thank you. I know it's customary to say that it's great to be back. We're happy to be here.
We didn't know it at the time, but during re-entry, gas from the attitude thrusters had entered the command module, creating a hazard. Quick action by the crew in recognizing and correcting the problem avoided a potentially tragic incident. They were later hospitalized in Hawaii for observation and treatment. The symptom cleared in a few days, and the crew was released. The spirit and the letter of the 1972 joint agreement had been dramatically fulfilled. Hopefully it represents a prelude to the future, to a time when all mankind will share the work and the dividends of space. The space shuttle is a major step in that direction. The shuttle will transport into orbit a European development called Space Lab. With 10 countries of Europe sharing construction and cost, men and women of many nationalities will be able to apply their creative talents aboard Space Lab for the benefit of the world community. but for Space Lab, for Shuttle, for all the cooperative space efforts to come. The groundwork has been laid by Apollo Soyuz, the model for the future.